Alright everyone, I'm Mike Mena, bringing to you the last installment. And if you've watched from the beginning, then you've probably managed to make your way through the whole book, which is a difficult book. So I hope that I made it just a little bit easier for you. Okay, so let's get right into it. Now, in part 4 of this series, we went in pretty deep into juridico-discursive theory. This is the idea that a lot of our social theory is based on this centralized idea of power, which is based on a metaphor of a monarchy, which he calls in this chapter sovereign power. This is the language that he uses. I think he kind of fluctuates between monarch, sovereign power, and juridical power. So once again, this is the kind of power that places limits on people and ultimately has the right to put people to death. So this is the ultimate right of the monarch, of the sovereign, of juridical power. On page 136, Foucault says this ultimately amounts to the, quote, right to take life or let live. The right to take life or let live. So on page 136, I'm going to read to you this little portion that I thought was important. It is right under that take life, let live, in the middle of the page. Okay, so power in this instance was essentially a right of seizure of things, time, bodies, and ultimately life itself. It culminated in the privilege to seize hold of life in order to suppress it. So now power has undergone a transformation over time. It's not really left this behind totally. Juridical power still exists, but it is more subtle and not necessarily so blatant. Keep in mind, we still do have the death penalty, right? But that is just but one mode or technology that is employed and reinforces this new form of power that instead places emphasis on, quote, fostering life or disallowing to the point of death. That is page 138. So there's this brand new focus on having power over the way that we live. We're now formulating a new will to knowledge, a will to know. What does that mean, a will? So discourses have emerged in a certain way that have made this will possible. It set the conditions for this will. So think of will as a desire to know, but it's also a disciplined desire, which kind of sounds like a pretty neat definition of will, a disciplined desire. So Foucault suggests that there are two poles that exist in this new power over life, which he calls biopower, life, power, biopower. Now, I made a chart that I'll show you now, and then I'll show it to you again at the end of the video so that you can pause it and kind of copy it or whatever you want to do with it. Now, it's a kind of visual, and I warn you that this is only a visual. Foucault would probably never have wanted a model like this that looks so static. There's no way to stretch charts over time. There's no way to stretch charts over particular racial groups, right? And at the same time, biopolitics cannot necessarily exist without mechanisms of discipline and vice versa. And charts, especially the one that I'm going to show you, does that. It splits them cleanly, as if it were possible to do so, but it's not. So therefore, use this as a visual only, but I think it'll be really helpful just as a visual. So let's get to the first pole, the discipline pole. Now here he says power works on the actual human body. That power trains bodies in particular ways so that they're useful to certain ends. Now, in Foucault's Discipline and Punish, which is the book right before this one, he goes in depth into discipline, where he says bodies are eventually rendered as docile bodies. So if you've seen that phrase, that's where it comes from. Now, this power individualizes and produces discourses about producing individuals. So this power is at the scale of individuals and bodies. Now, on the other side of the pole is biopolitics. And this is concerned with producing regulations on the scale of populations. So this includes any discourse that produces the concept population. And remember, discourse is not limited to language only. It includes things like math and charts and statistics. So we have two poles. We got discipline, we got biopolitics, and both of these fall under the rubric of biopower. Now, the chart, if you notice on the bottom, it has another portion that's labeled governmentality. This is a little bit of a later Foucauldian concept that is not elaborated on in History of Sexuality, so I'm not going to necessarily go into it here, but perhaps, someday if you get to the point of looking at Foucault's governmentality, you can come back to this chart, or maybe if there's enough interest, I'll eventually come back and do some more videos on Foucault. Okay, so what does biopower do? What's its objective? It seeks to normalize. So rather than unmask itself as brute, violent force, it wants to normalize populations. On page 144, he gives a nice long paragraph on normalization. So you should definitely check that out. Now, so biopower covers a lot of ground. So how might we think about this normalizing process? Well, first, we must think both official and unofficial processes and discourses. For example, let's say discourses like public opinion about some particular moral stance, some particular moral imperative that is then enforced through peer pressure. And then maybe these moral stances are subverted by some group of people. So then we send in anthropologists to go in and study it, who then inspires some guy to create some statistics on the phenomenon, which then sends the society into this moral panic, which might create new laws in Congress or something, which then becomes a new public opinion, and so on, and so on, and so on. You see, so you can see now why this visual chart is way too simple. Now, according to Foucault, sex is in this kind of privileged position because it is susceptible to intense forms of disciplinary power, that is, power at the scale of bodies, for example, birth control. But sex is also susceptible to biopolitics, that is, the scale of populations, For example, think again, birth control, right? Regulating populations. At the same time, it can regulate the biological functioning of individual bodies. Okay, so congratulations on finishing this book and these videos. If you're interested in a better understanding of this last chapter, I highly suggest reading these couple of books that I brought with me. So this is Foucault's lecture, one of his lectures, Society Must Be Defended. This is one of, like, I feel like this is probably one of the easiest, most accessible books of his lectures, selection of his lectures. Now, his lectures are really cool because they speak at a much easier register. It's a lot easier to follow sometimes. So definitely check out his lectures. Also, this book by Paul Rabinow, Beyond Structuralism and Hermeneutics. This is probably one of the best guides to Foucault. It's not so difficult that it's impossible to follow, but the chapters are divided up really easily, so you can like skip back and forth. If you've read a particular book, then there's a particular chapter that coincides with that book. So this is a really good book written by Rabinow, probably one of the best, or at least most highly recognized Foucauldian scholar. Also, you can check out Thomas Lemke's Biopolitics. This is a really easy, like, it says advanced introduction. It's definitely an introduction, but it's definitely advanced. And then finally, if you're interested in history, I would suggest Silencing the Past. Okay, so once again, I'm Mike Mena. Congratulations on finishing the book. Thank you for letting me walk you through it. I know it was hard, and I hope that I made it a little bit easier for you. I will see you guys around, maybe in the next video, maybe not.